Hi there. My name is Mennie. I am the author of the book Escape to the Wild, Dark Sea, and I'm about to read it to you. I'm reading to you from the same spot that I wrote the book, on the north coast of Ireland. Right outside my window, it is a dark, stormy night here on the shores of the tumultuous North Atlantic. So, wrap up warm, light the fire, and enjoy the story. Escape to the Wild, Dark Sea by Mennie. Chapter 1. Monsters Do Exist. Winter 2020, 11:30 p.m, Castle Rock Beach, Northern Ireland. I am standing in snow outside the door of my house. A vast ocean of stars illuminates the dark sky overhead. The sea is roaring 100 yards from where I am. The steam from my heavy breathing mixes with the smoke from a turf fire. I returned from the sea a few moments ago. Tonight, I swam a kilometre through a cauldron of surf and currents in the black, froth-filled North Atlantic. I am brimming with energy as my heart thumps below my neoprene-clad chest. There's another world out there, after dark. There has been a short respite this evening from the claws of the bitter storm, but it will rage on again in a few hours. The heavy turf smoke fills the air as I pull back my black rubber hood and wriggle my shoulders out of the suit. Steam rises off me as the cold air chases warmth from my skin. I rarely get a shower to warm up after. I prefer to get into my clothes for a while and then go to bed. A warm shower is a false economy after the exhilaration of the wild, cold sea. I never quite mastered the move from the shower into clothes without getting cold again, so I choose not to do it. Before I sleep, I write a few words about my experience in the surf tonight, drink a litre of milk, and turn the lights out. There are 3 of us in the bed, me, Sara, and nestled in between us is Blyton, our golden retriever. We sleep in the roof of the house below a sloped ceiling with a single window above part of the bed. The bed is only a few yards from the beach. I hear the sea all day, every day, all night, every night. It is always there. The sea is never silent. Even on the calmest nights, its pulse runs through me. The deep, rumbly voice tries to seduce me back into its embrace. Restless energy rises and falls all through the night. It never seems at ease. Tonight, the weather is calm. The sea is still wild, but the bitter winds of the past few days have dissipated. For now. On these calm nights, I often sleep with my door ajar. I like the feeling and contrast of being wrapped up in a wool blanket with cold air all around me. But tonight, the storm will return. Sleeping after the buzz of swimming in pounding North Atlantic surf in the middle of winter, in the dark, isn't easy. I'm feeling alive. The sea is still in my hair, the cold still on my face. I have to force myself to try and sleep, or I will feel wretched tomorrow. It is exhilarating out there in the pitch black. My eyes surrender to the darkness, but all my other senses are razor sharp. My eyes are alert, my body in time, with every push and pull of the water, as its energy rushes with mine. Body and mind navigate the raging surf as the dancing currents clash with the waves. Even the deserted beach walk back is incredible. Huffing and puffing to get my breath back under tonight's full moon and blanket of stars was out of this world. Now it's 11:55, and I'm tucked up in bed a few metres away, the sea still calling out for me. I will return tomorrow night. Now I must sleep. I don't sleep much, come to think of it. I drift off after midnight and wake several times throughout the night as the waves crash on the shore. It's 3:30 a.m. now, and the storm is raging across the roof of the house. I can hear constant turbulence from the sea, interspersed with the sounds of much larger waves breaking with significantly more violence. Blyton is wandering around the room, unable to sleep. I get up and we go to the door for a look. The calmness has passed. The snow that was covering the ground a few hours ago is now ice. The starry sky is gone, obscured by heavy cloud cover. The night is now pitch black as the storm continues its assault. The storm took a step back last night and sharpened the knife. Now it is back, attacking the north coast with vigour. I can hear the wetsuit I left outside, over the railing, slapping around in the wind and darkness. 3 surfboards lying outside are banging together in the storm. The wind rush is lifting them and dropping them back onto the ground as it sweeps along the coast. Blyton and I lie on the sofa for the rest of the night. The wind is whirling by the windows, demanding my attention. It carries a steady flow of fresh snowfall as it rattles on the window. Neither of us can sleep as the storm rages under the cover of darkness. Often our weather comes off the Atlantic. The Atlantic weather tends to sweep in and sweep out. But when it comes from the east, like tonight, it is often vicious and unnerving. It is here to shake things up, disrupt, and clear the air. It's 6:30 a.m. now. I'm lying listening to the weather rage between me and the sea. Blyton is lying beside me on the sofa, with his big head resting on my shin. He is a 41-kilogram golden retriever. His chest is broad, and his face strong and defined. He is snuggling between my leg and the back of the sofa, under the end of my blanket. He sits up, and as he does, he pulls the cover off, letting the cold air rush in around us. Now he is sitting upright, with the blanket over his head, waiting for me to remove it so he can see and get out of bed. We both go to the door to see how the sea is behaving this morning. It is still dark, of course, as the sun doesn't rise until about 8:30 a.m. this time of year. We peer out into the inky darkness anyway. I'm wearing lots of layers. A grey wool blanket drapes over my broad shoulders and hangs loosely around my calves. I rarely put the heat on. I prefer to wear layers in bed and light the fire rather than the heat blasting me. Blyton wants to go out for a pee, so I open the door. The harsh wind rushes up to us and howls its cold breath in our faces. Blyton stands his ground undeterred, but he isn't in any rush to go out there. He contemplates for a second or two in the doorway before wandering out. A sprinkling of frozen snow grips to the paving slabs next to the ashes of last night's fire. Blyton crunches his way out, while I try to prevent the wind from taking the door off its hinges. He does a few laps outside before pushing his hips towards the ground. With defiance, he raises his big chest into the wind and does his morning pee, his long white coat blown back as he faces head-on into the bitterness. He looks completely unconcerned out there. As I keep the wind at bay behind the glass door, my mind is on tonight. I live by the tide, not by time, and I'm thinking forward to what the conditions will be like after nightfall. I'm thinking about swimming. I'm planning, wondering what the wind and sea will do tonight. Will they continue this tantrum that has been going on for days, or will they take another break? Either way, for better or for worse, I will be among it. I have only woken, and immediately my mind is in the sea. My late night affair with the dark North Atlantic ignited a flame many moons ago. It has become part of life, and at times it consumes my thoughts, distracts me, absorbs me. I go out there in all weather, except if the risk outweighs the reward, which is very rarely the case. Most people might consider the risk to always outweigh the reward, but I'm in tune with it, connected to it. I'm part of the sea, and it is part of me, particularly here at Castle Rock, where I learned to surf and swim as a child. I know these waters, and I like to think they know me too. There have been a few stints of severe north wind since I started swimming late at night. I decided not to swim in those conditions, as they tend to push river water and all sorts of debris into the surf zone. In fact, it isn't the sea, the wind, or the dark that concern me, just what lurks within. Trees, logs, fishing nets, and for lack of a better word, brown fish, all appear in the shallows. I can handle most things that evade my sight, but if I get hit by any of those, then it could be game over. Risk management is important, to a degree. So I'm always on the lookout for a potential switch in the wind to the north. I often swim more on the nights ahead of a north wind forecast to make up for not being able to swim a night or two. This morning, the wind has plenty of east in it, but by nightfall, it will move to the west. It has been blowing for days now. It has its benefits. When the wind is wild and angry, it makes the sea somewhat predictable, especially in the lower tides. Water from the surf easily escapes along the gullies between the sandbanks and then back out to sea. When the tide is higher, the gullies swell and flood, and it becomes chaotic for a swimmer. There is method to what may appear as madness. At all times, the water is flowing and moving for a reason. The more emotional the wind is, the more it affects the sea's behaviour. The trick is tuning into that and approaching with caution. The sea expects commitment. It doesn't care for your weekend visit or holiday fling. It may give you surface chatter at best, but it reserves its deeper energy for those that commit their lives to it. Blyton comes back in, the cold air clinging to his fur. He has a little shake, and we walk through to the kitchen. I used to have a coffee first thing in the morning, but I felt like I was drinking too much coffee. So in apparent me fashion, I stopped. For my birthday in November, I decided no more. It was horrific. A 2-week come down from caffeine ensued, and I felt like I was hit by a bus most days. I will never go back to that. As we go into the kitchen, I fumble around the worktop for a box of matches. I find it and stuff my sausage-sized fingers into the little cardboard box. One left. I strike it and light a candle on the table. The candle's single flame flickers into life, pushing the remaining darkness into the corners of the room. I turn the coffee machine on, not for me, for Sara. She is still in bed, but I know she'll wake any time now. As soon as the grinder starts up, Blyton's ears prick up. Blyton thinks the coffee machine is a snack machine. Blyton gets a handful of snacks, and Sara gets a coffee. With the coffee in one hand and Blyton's snacks in the other, I walk through the dark living area. I continue up the creaky wooden stairs, pass by the little portal window, and into the bedroom. Blyton has followed me, carrying his cushion. I wake Sara and hand her a double espresso. Blyton jumps up onto the bed to eat his snacks with her. I head off down the stairs again into the darkness and return to the kitchen. The smell of freshly ground coffee fills the air. The candle on the table flickers in the breeze created as I walk by. I substituted my old morning coffee habit with good food. I reach for my knife, an onion, some ginger, a clove of garlic, a lemon, a jar of oregano, a chunk of sea bass, and a bottle of olive oil. It's not even 7 a.m, and none of this stuff is breakfasty, but I need it. I chose all the ingredients because the internet tells me they do lots of great things. I find it easier to eat them all at once, raw. I chop them all up, squeeze in the lemon, a glug of oil, and mix in the fish. I have no idea if eating like this makes a physical difference, but it makes a psychological one anyway. Blyton comes thundering down the stairs. He knows I'm going to share a piece of bread with him as I eat this concoction. As you can tell, I'm not a great cook. I prefer to eat whole foods and fuel the machine, and keep the fire in my belly well stoked. I do cook a lot, but nothing to write about. I sit at the wooden kitchen table to eat beside the candlelight. Blyton is lying by my right foot. Every time I set my spoon down, he looks up. He knows it takes 2 hands to break a piece of bread for him. I was swimming at 10:45 p.m. last night. I swam over a kilometre in what most people would consider to be crazy conditions. It was everything but crazy to me. In the mornings, I relive last night's swim, but I also wonder what tonight will bring. No 2 nights are the same. We live on an island in the northwest Atlantic. The moods of the sea and the weather continually swing and clash as they reach for our shores. Accepting that is helpful. Shape-shifting weather and sea conditions, combined with different levels of darkness, make night surf swimming unpredictable at best. As I eat, I'm looking at various weather charts, but I know this stuff is only part of the puzzle. The sea will show me what I need to know, when I need to know it. We are in the grips of a pandemic lockdown. It has been a long winter at the mercy of this monster. It imprisons us at home, except for allowing certain things deemed safe to do. The combined arms of the dark and the winter ally the threat of the pandemic lurking outside. They surround us in the perfect chokehold. Everything we know is under attack, shrinking our worlds, threatening our health, and infecting our minds. I have worked and played within its rules, only to escape each night to the sea. As the dark waters creep into one world, I escape and dive into those of another. The words improvise, adapt, and overcome fill my mind. I must survive this. The monster is attempting to remove light from our lives. The winter light struggles to hold its ground before submitting. As soon as darkness falls, cloaking the outside world, I want to go to the sea. Other people who refuse to give in also go outdoors after dark. The benefit of the outdoors may build resistance to the attack. Fishermen and walkers persist. For this reason, I swim very late at night. I need to be sure there's no one on the beach that may worry for my safety in the water after dark. I know not everyone has my connection to the sea, nor do they understand it. To see me enter the water late at night in the middle of winter could raise concern in an onlooker. I don't want the emergency services called out unnecessarily. For every bit of bread I eat this morning, Blyton gets a piece too. We are pretty much joined at the hip, comrades in this crazy world. Where I go, he more often than not goes too, except into the sea. He loves swimming, but I rarely swim with him. He prefers the chase of going after the splash made for me throwing rocks into the water for him. One after another, over and over again, he swims after the splashes. He swims like he was born to. He glides with ease through the water, not a drop out of place. His big bushy tail rudders behind him. A real-life salty sea dog. His first ever swim was with me in the dark one winter night at West Strand in Portrush in 2014. I walked out into the water, in the darkness, with him in my arms as a pup, and let him go. Off he went, charging back to shore. I worried that I might have frightened him, but he's loved it ever since. He stands on the shore, timing his dash into the waves so as not to get thrown back. He reads the water and the surges like an old, experienced fisherman, launching his boat for the umpteenth time. He has grown up on these beaches and knows the surf well. He knows when to go and knows when to flow. The light is starting to break the dark night. The sun nowhere to be seen, but the morning is starting to break through. Dark clouds sit heavy and low over a boiling, turbulent sea. White waves break as far as I can see out into the murky dawn. The wind is driving choppy, brown river water along the coast. White veins of foam tear through the surface of dark green and brown brine. God only knows what's in that water. Tonight's swim is going to be another wild one. Those are my favourite. Wild weather means no one around and deserted beaches, which puts me at ease before entering the cauldron. I go upstairs to my office in the roof of the house. Low-sloped ceilings drop down to the floor, giving me enough head height. 2 small windows allow an elevated view out into the wild winter's day. Well, they normally do, but the frozen snow is covering them and has done for days. I have a single wooden chair sitting in a tiny little space below the slope ceiling and one of the windows. It is an old chair. The woven mesh in its back is hanging together by a few strands. I put 2 cushions in it to take the strain, and I sit in it. Blyton comes over and, as usual, growls until I give him one of the cushions. He takes it and puts it under his chin and lies by my feet. I catch up on some emails and other work, and then it's time for second breakfast. Blyton knows it, and we trundle down the stairs again. Blyton and I eat some eggs with bread and get ready to leave the house to check the conditions. It's bright now. Salt and sand cake in the windows. White horses are charging from as far out as I can see. Gulls are hovering outside the windows with wings spread wide, effortlessly riding on the storm. The sea, the weather, everything is alive. The sea is a chaotic, bubbling broth. It is putting on quite the show this morning. Waves are smashing over the end of the nearby pier, dwarfing it. The waves approach from far out at sea before standing tall, taking aim, and exploding onto the stone and concrete pier. It doesn't flinch, doesn't budge, just stands there, taking all the wrath the ocean throws at it. The wind whips the aftermath into a frenzy, and the spray drifts like smoke from a bomb. One after another, each wave attempts to unsteady the opposition, but it's here to stay. It is snowing again. White flakes drift in the wind, contrasted against the black basalt stone of the neighbour's house. I love this weather. Putting on layers and venturing out there is exciting. I pull my jeans over my tracksuit bottoms and tuck the ankles into my ex-Austrian army boots. I'm hard on footwear. Trainers don't survive more than a couple of months before the sole comes off or they crack. I find good leather boots are best, and I can repair them. I lace them all the way up to keep the wind out of my legs. I pull on my wool jumper, hat, and my dad's old sheepskin coat. Blyton is standing halfway down the stairs, looking over his shoulder at me, waiting for me to catch up. I stump down the stairs and out we go. There's a monster out here somewhere. If we don't follow the rules, it may catch us off guard. We live a fairly insular life here, for the most part, so fingers crossed, it doesn't get us. The deserted streets are silent of cars and people under a blanket of snow. Everyone is working from home, hiding from the weather. I open my van door as I want to check the beach out on the other side of the cliffs. Downhill beach. I've been swimming at Castle Rock or downhill, depending on people. If there are people on the beach at Castle Rock, I go to downhill. But I've preferred to swim over there. It's darker, and there's never anyone around. The beach there is pitch black and very intimidating, as it is 7 miles long. Walkers tend not to go there after dark. I can often swim there much earlier than at Castle Rock, conditions permitting. Blyton stands with his front feet on the doorsill of the van. He can jump up onto the seat himself, but he would rather I lift him. 1, 2, 3. I count out loud as I heave him up onto the seat. He walks across the seats, spins round, and once I climb in, he sits right next to me. He puts his front paws on my left leg and his shoulder leaning against mine. Loves his da. Unfortunately, I must go back to the kitchen to get hot water to clear the window of frozen snow. He isn't happy and barks non-stop until I return. I pour the hot water over the windshield to reveal the barking madness inside the van. Off we go. Being the first vehicle on the road in snow is magical. Downhill Beach is only a mile away up over the cliff top, past the ruin of a castle, and down to the beach on the other side. We drive up out of the village to the main road. Still, not too many vehicles have passed on this road either. Black streaks of tar show through the fresh snowfall, but snow plasters everything else. We pass the derelict castle, and the lion statues guarding the gates. The road meanders down a steep hill towards the beach, with a view of the sea and the forest lining the road. They must have graded the road last night, as the hill isn't too slippery, considering the weather. There is a 230-year-old Italian-style temple perched right on the edge of the cliff at the eastern end of the beach. It is visible for miles, dominating the coastline. The temple is a dome-type building. It has the words from an Italian poet, Lucretius, scribed around it. In English, it is translated to, "'Tis pleasant, safely to behold from shore the troubled sailor, and hear the tempests roar." I often wonder what sights it has witnessed. The beach runs 7 miles to the west, all the way to McGilligan Point. McGilligan is the last point of Northern Ireland, before Lough Foyle and the Republic of Ireland. A huge prison and Martello Tower stand defiantly on the end of the point, next to a military base. They are quite the eyesore. Huge concrete structures, isolated among green fields, next to the beautiful beach. In the darkness late at night, I often hear the pop, pop, pop of shooting practice out of the army base. Gunfire rattling in the night at the far end of the beach I'm swimming on must be an unusual occurrence in Europe. I turn the van off-road and begin to drive onto the sand. The wind is stripping the beach of white sand, exposing bare, brown, hard sand all the way to the water's edge. The odd pocket of snow fills sunken holes where the wind cannot reach. I drive a little way to the west. I always park at the same place next to a stream. I know the sand there is hardest, and there's no chance of the van sinking. Blyton is now standing on my legs, waiting for the door to open. He squashes between my chest and the steering wheel, staring at the door handle, longing for it to open. Boom! Out he goes, diving from my legs out onto the beach and off running mad in the wind. He runs and throws himself onto the ground on his right shoulder. He starts rolling around his back, growling and barking. As I walk to catch up with him, I notice snow is capping the basalt cliff that runs along the back of the beach. 2 waterfalls run down the cliff and then onto the beach. The waterfalls are completely frozen to the cliff face. The bitter wind has stopped them in their tracks. The water on the beach from the runoff is also frozen. Not one other person is visible for miles. There is an eeriness about lockdown. No people, no life, and this extreme weather pattern is like something from a movie. Blyton and I wander the beach. I scour the shoreline for logs, nets, or anything else the sea might have left behind during the night. I come across a saturated wooden pallet, try to free it from the suction between it and the sand, but it is stuck. I finally manage to break it free and drag it all the way up over the high tide mark, with Blyton barking at it as I go. If it weren't so wet, I would throw it into the van for the fire back home. Imagine that bobbing around below the surface of the water as I'm swimming down the coast later tonight. That's the sort of thing I have no control over, so I try to control as much as I can before I ever enter the water after dark. Though I can't control everything. Eventually, I must surrender to the unknown. In the water, 3 fish have bumped me so far. One on my lower leg, one on my hip, and another in my side. One inquisitive seal, well, one that I know about, has accompanied me in the dark. I heard a splash one night that startled me as I swam through the surf at Castle Rock. Of course, there are continual noises, but this one stood out and caught my attention. The sea and the weather are wild enough, but a wild animal in the dark, black Atlantic that may not be happy about my presence is a potential nightmare. But he was not bothered, just nosy. His little head was silhouetted against the distant lights above the surface of the water. He followed me along. Every now and again, I would stop swimming, and he would be about 30 feet behind me. He wasn't hiding in the dark. If anything, he was breaking his cover, making me aware he was with me as I swam. I often drag logs, nets, and even dead seals up the beach in the daylight so they don't lurk among the surf after dark. Further along the coast, I found a dead, headless pig washed up. No doubt, lots of other things going around me out there that I am unaware of, but that doesn't concern me. I keep an eye on conditions throughout the day to be as prepared as I can by the time I'm in the water. The problem is that it's dark so early at 4 p.m. and I don't swim until several hours later because there may be people around. So knowing exactly what I'm going into is almost impossible, so I try to stay as connected as I can during daylight. I've been on these beaches and in the sea here since I was a baby. That gives me a deep understanding of the water in this area, and it's that experience that keeps me relatively safe. Blyton and I walk about a mile to the west to a little river called the Umbra. It usually comes out across the beach about 400 metres further west than where it is today. With so much snowmelt recently, it has moved along the beach before breaking into the North Atlantic. The power of the river flow has cut a huge gouge in the beach. A vertical cliff face of compacted sand now lines the edge of the river. Some sections of it are towering well over my head as I walk along the banks. When it is dark and I'm swimming along the coast, I always know I'm passing the mouth of the Umbra. Not that I can see it, but I can feel it. The waves are more violent as they break against the outward movement. The water is often confused and undecided as to which way to flow. Sometimes there are sticks and leaves in the water too. I try to avoid the mouth of the Umbra if I can, depending on conditions. If you saw it during the day, you would probably not consider it to be of any threat to me at night. But there is significant movement around the area as it enters the sea. Out of sight, strong currents work their way through the underwater sandbanks. If I'm in them, then I become part of the flow, or forced backwards if I'm swimming the wrong direction. Other little streams and waterfalls have a similar effect along this beach, but not as much as the Umbra. Blyton and I turn and face into the bitter wind. The snow is coming down harder now, and the beach is turning white. As I walk, I lean into the wind's bite. The snow fills my beard, and my sheepskin jacket darkens with the wet. We push head on into the blizzard and make our way back to the van. The beach is now covered in a beautiful white snow. The sky is heavy and dark overhead, with huge fairy tale flakes of snow falling hard. 1, 2, 3. I heave the big snowy dog up into the front of the van again. The van is full of sand and salt water, but today it's also full of snow. Blyton is panting in a way that looks like he is smiling, enjoying the weather. I want to get on the road before the snow makes it difficult to get the van back up the hill and over to the village again. We cruise along the snowfield covering the beach back to the road, which is also now pure white. The evergreen forest caked in snow, standing next to the big dark cliffs. We creep the van up the hill and cruise home. The countryside is completely white. The road's deserted. It's beautiful. So, Blyton and I arrive home from our daily recce of Downhill Beach. It looks as if our van was one of the only vehicles that left the village this morning. Our tracks on the road out of town hashed by only a few more tyres while we were gone. Most people are inside, staying warm, staying safe, and working from home. Some are out, trying to go about their lives in the face of the pandemic. Blyton jumps out of the van and, as usual, waits until he is in the hall to have a shake. Sand and snow go everywhere, sticking to the walls and the door. He stops and looks up at me, as if to say, "Thanks, Da, that was good." Chapter 2. The Other World. Each evening, I walk around the village with Blyton. At about 9:30 p.m, we go and check for vehicles parked at the beach to see who is yet to return and go home before I swim. Sometimes, a few dog walkers and fishermen use the beach after dark. The fishermen tend to stay towards the rocks, and the walkers tend to stay on the beach in front of the village. The odd brave soul walks the beach in complete darkness, though. I've got to know who does what and when, and that allows me to do my swim unnoticed. Once everyone has done their thing, I go out to do mine. At the beginning, I found the presence of people to be the most difficult thing to navigate. I find the behaviour of the wind and the surf more predictable than that of people. Come to think of it, having been so connected to the sea since a young age, I've had a longer relationship with it than with almost any other person. So, of course, I would find it more easily understood. When I began swimming at night, I had many false starts. I would go to swim and then come across someone at the beach and have to abandon it. I tried swimming early, late, and even at 4 a.m. to avoid them and make sure I wasn't seen. This is a particular issue at Castle Rock, where the village fronts part of the beach. Too many people get too close to my other world and might see me slipping into it. Their presence threatens my swim with an unnecessary emergency call. For this reason, I tend to swim most often at the beach on the western side of the cliffs, Downhill Beach. Each night, before I leave to swim, I light a fire. All year round, Blyton and I collect driftwood from the beaches and keep it piled up outside the house. I also pull turf from the ground when I'm out surfing down the coast. I burn them both each night in a little clay chimney before I go. There is little more primitive than fire. It reaches the soul, bringing warmth to us beyond the heat felt in our skin. The flickering light and heat mesmerizes me as it holds the darkness back. It moves and surges flame out into the black, thriving as much at night as it does in daylight. As long as the fire has fuel, it will overcome all darkness. The wind is so strong that the candle I've brought out to light the fire won't stay lit. I've brought a piece of wood inside to get going before throwing it into the fire. I put a lump of turf in the centre, 4 pieces of driftwood in and around it, and leave it to burn. By the time I come back, the turf will be smouldering. On the still, calm nights, the smoke often drifts out to sea, and I can smell the turf from the water, but not tonight. Tonight, with this angry wind, I will be lucky if it stays lit. I am in the habit of leaving one suit outside to drip dry, and another hanging from the shower in the bathroom. I call them my battle suits. It is a great motivator to have something kept specifically for one thing. They are an extension of me, and so I take great care and pride in them. I have my suits tailored so they are snug fit. The better they fit, the better I fit into the world around me. Once I swim, I move the one outside in and put the one I used on the real outside. It is a race to see which one can dry first. One is always closer to dry than the other, but neither are ever dry. After 30-odd years of putting on wetsuits, whether they are wet or not doesn't matter. I pull my suit from the shower and wring out the ankles. I lay it on the floor in the hall between my office and the bathroom. We don't have tiles, just a painted concrete floor with an old Indian rug covering the white paint. I'm quick to get changed before I soak the place. I take my lower clothes off first and pull a wetsuit onto my waist. My wetsuit boots are next to go on. They have never been dry since the day I bought them. They squelch and suck as I pull them over my big white feet. I keep my top half clothed until the last minute, preserving the heat among the layers. Then I whip them all off in one go and haul the rest of the suit up over my shoulders. I have a neoprene hood that comes up over my head from behind my neck and over my face like a balaclava. Then a zipper fastens it to the suit at my chest. As I pull it over my head, it completely engulfs all my hair and beard. All that is showing is my face inside the black neoprene. I pull the neoprene seams forward, accidentally tugging at my beard. I prefer my beard out of the suit. It's a little more comfortable. I lift all my clothes and carry them downstairs in my arms for Blyton. He likes to lie next to them while I'm away. I leave the clothes on the landing where he lies waiting for me and hand him both socks. He's lying on the end of the sofa, but as soon as I leave, he will move to the top of the stairs and watch the door until I return. I always wonder what he is thinking as his eyes follow me down the stairs. Despite having been going into the sea here most of my life, I am very aware that one day it may not let me come back. I am fortunate to feel so at ease out there, day or night, but I am under no illusion that I am in charge. There are forces within both worlds much bigger than me. Despite all my experience and knowledge, there may come a day that the sea decides to keep me. For that reason, before I leave, I make sure Blyton has food and water. I always kiss and hug both him and Sarah before I go. Chances are I'll be fine, but you never know. Life can change in an instant. Leaving the house in a wetsuit is always going to attract attention late at night. Before I leave, I put my hoodie and my checked flannel shirt over my suit. I look like a lumberjack in leggings, but it's better than someone seeing me in a wetsuit. That is, of course, if there were any passers-by, but there aren't. Just my neighbour bracing her door against the wind as her dog wanders around the front garden. She is pleading with the dog to come back in, but he's enjoying the freedom without her tugging on his lead for once. I get into my van and begin the short drive over to Downhill Beach. My van is 17 years old. It has been a bit of a labour of love. It is bare sheet metal on the inside, no wood or carpet lining. Every bump and noise from the road rattles inside. The deserted street is like a bottle, frozen solid with a cover of crunchy snow. It is 10:30 p.m. and I'm setting off for a swim. Sounds daft, probably is. As I leave the village lights behind, climbing the hill to the main road, I can see why no one is out. It is damn cold tonight, and the roads are far from ideal. I slow at the junction using my gears rather than my brakes. The van comes to a halt. The road is empty. No one around. Everyone locked down, staying safe, watching TV, and doing what they can to stay afloat during the pandemic. I slowly pull out onto the main road and begin to head west towards the castle. The road is icy. I push the van into second gear, but no more. I'm in no rush. I love this weather. I often wish I lived in snowy Norway. Downhill often reminds me of there. The vast open sea, the big cliffs, the endless sands seaming the countryside with the sea. The fields Blyton and I passed after our walk earlier are now cloaked in darkness. The only light is from the van headlights on the snowy road. It crosses my mind that the hill down to Downhill Beach might be impassable now. Not deep snow, but ice and snow. I creep to the top of it before the castle gates come into sight to check. If I get stuck coming back later, then I will leave the van and walk back along the cliff top in the dark. I creep the van over the brow of the hill and ease into first gear. The hill is a good 300 metres long all the way down to the beach. The van engine is revving hard in first, but I daren't touch the brakes or I may not stop. I make it down to the bottom of the hill and swing onto the slip road without a single touch of the brakes. As my headlights reach the sand, I see the endless darkness ahead of me. To the north, to the west, to the east. Dark. In the distance, I can make out the faint glow of the prison at McGilligan Point, about 7 miles away. Other than that, there's no light at all. The villages on Inishowen Head are completely engulfed by the storm. Often their little lights twinkle in the night, but not now. A few holiday houses dot along the foot of the cliff, but no lights are on. The caravan's left abandoned until spring. Is it any wonder no one comes here late at night? The darkness is suffocating everything. The headlights bounce over the dips and rises of the sand as I make my way to the same spot I always park. The wind is pushing the side of the van as if trying to unnerve me. I notice something. A tiny little light is flickering in the darkness. I can't tell how close it is because there's nothing to get a bearing on. I crawl the van forward across the beach, edging closer. Pulling up alongside, I still can't work out what it is. I'm colourblind, so I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's a red light pulsing in the sand. The wind is howling, and as I try to get my door open, I anchor myself as best I can so it doesn't slam on me. It is a dog light, but no dog and no owner. Or that's how it appears anyway. It is so dark, there could be someone standing right in front of me, and I wouldn't see them. The wind is howling and the sea is roaring. There's an immense vulnerability out here. The darkness and the storm overwhelm both my sight and hearing. This one little light appears to be the only bit of hope among the sheer darkness tonight. Miles of black all around, and like a moth to a flame, it draws me in. The storm is raging, yet this little light stands its ground. I leave the little light flickering in the sand, the COVID monster so prominent in my mind that I daren't pick it up for fear of infection. I get back into the van to continue to my parking spot on the hard sand. It is super eerie down here. Lockdown is eerie. With no people and no noise from the road as the ice and snow add weight to the shackles of the pandemic. Lockdown rules allow exercise, but no one is availing of that tonight. Am I mad? Or is everyone else mad? What on earth has driven me to these ends? Is it passion, adventure, isolation? The need to escape from the current world we live in? Sometimes I don't know why I'm doing this, but I'm enjoying it. Me and the sea. As I park up, switch off the engine, and the lights go out, I say out loud, "What are you doing?" Thoughts of, leave it tonight, make up for it tomorrow night, it might not be safe, run through my mind. Everything often seems darker from the perspective of inside looking out though. Out I get, into the wild weather, and move to the rear of the van. My eyes adjust to the smothering of light, allowing me to see varying degrees of, well, black. Or maybe it could be argued to be a deep shade of charcoal grey. I take off my jacket and hoodie and throw them into the back of the van. The wind swings my door and it hits me on my left side. I text Sarah to tell her my plans and slam the door shut. Me and the elements now. As I walk, the van disappears into the black. I know from experience that the current tonight is likely sweeping from the west to the east. Well, the predominant current anyway. Often, I encounter several currents I do not plan for, but there's no way of knowing. I trust my judgment, ability, and experience to get me back home. I walk to the west to get upstream of the expected flow. A 200-foot cliff backdrops the beach. It towers over the sands. There's no way any light from the villages and towns in the distance to the south could ever cast light here. The more I walk, the darker it gets. As I walk, I feel at ease but alert. The vast emptiness of the sands running to the sea is all around me. I am a drop in the ocean, a small, little, insignificant, 6'5" human in the massive world around me. Despite this, I am looking for the dog and its owner in case they are out in the storm too. I don't want to concern anyone for my safety, so I would rather slip by unnoticed. I walk in the cliff's shadows, where I am not seen against the faint light of the prison in the distance. The wind can't get at me here, and if there is someone else in the darkness, I won't burden them with worry. I'm in a black wetsuit with matching hood. The only things which aren't clad in the black rubber are my face, my red beard, and my hands. I'm virtually invisible in the dark of night, a kind of midnight aqua ninja. The air is cold, and neoprene gloves do exist, but I prefer to persevere without them. I find it easier to swim, and once my hands go numb, I forget about the pain. The cold air fills my lungs as I walk. I exhale the air onto my left hand, breathe again, and blow it onto my right hand. Several little streams run across the big, open sands. I come to the first one, and I'm careful not to slip on the frozen water floating on the sand. It is only meters from the sea, but it's frozen solid. This doesn't happen very often, but it has happened a lot this winter. I regain my footing and start walking further into the darkness. A handful of yellow streetlights exist towards the entrance to the beach. As I walk, they get further and further from sight, the night getting darker, tightening its grip on me. The clouds move fast overhead, across the top of the basalt cliff face, as I cross another stream on the beach. This one is from a waterfall, which runs onto the beach again. It is frozen solid too. I always feel like I must look over my shoulder when I walk in the dark. I keep wondering whether someone is here. The unknown causes fear, but to embrace the unknown and not run away kills fear. The little dog light lying in the sand has got me wondering even more. It is very rare that I ever see people in the dark late at night. One night, I was swimming the beach from the east to the west when I came across a light again, This time, I was way along the beach in complete darkness, maybe 100 metres out in the sea. There was hardly any surf, and the night was very still and settled. The sea barely moved that night. I froze in the water, trying to work out what the little light was. It was so small, and I kept blinking to clear my vision of salt water to make sure I wasn't seeing things. A tiny little dot of light appeared to be floating in the dark air towards shore. I crept closer and closer, completely stealth-like, with only my eyes and nose out of the water. I could make out something moving on the wet sand at the edge of the beach. It was a fisherman. He was sitting in the darkness, and the light was on the tip of his rod. I didn't know what to do. I froze still for a moment until I decided the best thing to do was to creep back into the darkness and away from him. I didn't want to disturb or raise concern. I went into full Navy SEAL mode. I commando crawled out of the shallows and up the beach so as not to stand up and break the distant skyline with my silhouette. I've seen him many times here since. He sits in the darkness with his line out at the eastern end of the beach. No lights, except the tiny little LED on the tip of his rod. I assume he also loves the darkness, the escape, the freedom. He probably thinks I'm mad. No doubt many people think he is too, but here we are. Why are we doing what we do in the dark? I imagine his reasons are much like mine. I get to the Umbra. The steady flow crosses the beach before disappearing into the shallow reaches of the Atlantic. I expect the current in the surf will be strong enough to push through the river flow. I wade across the knee-deep water and keep heading west. There's a heavy flow for a little stream. I hear the sand walls collapsing in the bend. It is cutting through the beach in the water's desperate rush for the freedom of the Atlantic. It does cross my mind if I should not swim across its mouth tonight. There's a lot going on out here. But these wild surf conditions are often the best for swimming with the flow along the coast. I push on a bit further into the darkness to get upstream of the ocean current a bit more. Another few hundred meters walking will give me a good kilometre or so as the crow flies to swim back through the surf. I walk and stop. I crouch down and try to see any person that may be here. I look to see if I can spot anyone breaking the prison skyline or distant town to the east, but there's no one. I'm pretty sure I'm here alone in this storm. Often, stars litter the sky, like last night, or the moon is sometimes so bright it can look like I'm in a black and white photograph. I can sometimes make out the surf, the cliffs, and lots of the beach. But tonight, it's not like that. The dark is overwhelming everything. There are no stars, no moon. Thick cloud cover is hanging overhead. The surf is big and the wind is blowing hard from the west. These are good conditions though. All this energy helps me predict the likely flow. There's constant big surf, so I know what to expect. I hate the nights when it's calm. All sorts of currents appear, and I can get held or moved by them. Then sneaker waves creep up out of nowhere and catch me out. It is very stressful swimming on those dark, mysterious nights. The sea doesn't show its hand until the last moment. I prefer these raging nights when it is wearing its heart on its sleeve, and its emotion is clear to read. Well, clearer to read. It is still an unknown quantity every time I enter the dark sea. I used to feel uneasy at this point, but I've become much more at ease. I find myself longing for this moment, wishing the darkness to fall, so I can be right here. When I started swimming in the late nights, I tended to swim near the village. I suppose I wasn't committing to the dark. I had one leg out, so to speak, in case I needed to get out for some reason. Maybe I couldn't let go, didn't trust myself. At the start, this whole swimming at night malarkey was a simple escape from the fallout of the pandemic. But the escape wasn't enough. I wanted it to be darker, wilder, and more isolated. That's why I'm standing where I am right now. I leave the cliff's shadow and walk out onto the vast beach. making my way towards the water's edge. There is no shelter here. The wind can get at me from any angle. It swirls around me, making its presence known. Then it swoops in, reaches for my long beard, and nudges me, as if to warn me whose world I'm in. I have a slight lean to brace my stride. Sometimes it pauses to catch me off guard, and just as I'm about to straighten my posture, it blows again. I reach the water, the sea stretching out at my toes, calling me in. I stop, close my eyes, and nod to the horizon. I open my eyes, draw an icy breath, and begin to wade out through the shallows. The sand hard and flat below my neoprene boots. The beach reaches infinitely out below the waves into the black Atlantic night. A flatfish scurries before my foot falls and traps it. Their wriggle to escape startles me every time, but it happens regularly. Dead crab and razor clam shells litter the seabed close to the dry sand. They crunch below my boots as I push into the ocean. The storm has forced them out of the deeper gullies and thrown them towards shore. I walk through the surges of the dissipating surf, and froth moves on the surface of the ever-blackening water. The more I walk, the more froth and the darker the water becomes below. I am now up to my knees, lifting each foot forward and pushing it purposefully through the water as the sea begins to pull me in. This is no man's land, the space between one world and another. I push out into the depths where I can blend into the darkness, disappear, and relax. The surface gleams like spilled black ink as white waves surge from the dark North Atlantic. I continue out into the ocean, its surges getting bigger, faster, and more powerful. I'm bracing myself each time it hits me. The froth is getting deeper, its energy getting stronger, drawing me in to its embrace. The current is sweeping at me, trying to carry me with it. The waves are powering their way ashore. The water they bring moves east as it tries to find a way back out to sea through the turbulent surf. Despite the strength of the wind and swell, the umbra is overpowering the sea near shore. A clash of energies is fighting for control. Each flow of water refusing to let me go with the other. The intense tug of war forces water at me, pulling me in one direction, then shoving me in another. Eventually, one will tire and the other will be victorious. The surf is draining through the gully between the outside sandbanks and those closer to shore. The currents are fierce, almost dragging me off my feet, but I'm shallow enough to stand strong against them for now. I decide to push on out a bit further into the dark water. I hope that getting into deeper water will free me of the currents. I've swum against these kind of clashes before. They tend to ebb and flow, but eventually I break free and swim with the most dominant. Swimming in a current among the surf is a dance with the ocean itself. It takes a step towards me and I move with it. Then it steps back and I go with it. We glide along the coast, back and forth like dancers in a ballroom, entangled in each other's embrace. I can see and hear the white broken waves coming at me at this point. One more wave, and then I will dive under and swim out a little more to get myself behind the near-shore breaking waves. A wave breaks and rushes me. I dive under, reach forward with both hands, out into the pitch black. I pull my hands back down by my sides to draw me through the wave. My neoprene hood and the water all around me muffle the noise from the chaotic surf as it rumbles overhead. For a few moments, I am cocooned in the darkness, the calm within the storm. The cold air in my lungs is fueling the moment. A complete release from the world above the surface is down here in the dark waters. I pop up behind the wave, where the water is fizzing. The froth left on the surface barely lights my way before the black water overcomes it and the darkness absorbs it. I begin swimming. The sound of the wave disappears into the dark close to shore, making way for the sound of the next. Another wave approaches, but I'm beyond the break zone now. I rise over the inky, stealth-like mass as its energy passes below me before breaking. These waves have travelled across an ocean. Like an army, they march one after another into their imminent demise on the Irish coastline. The sandbanks lie in wait, ready to trip the weary soldiers in their final rush for the coast. I feel each gasp of air as they fold at the waist and collapse to their knees into their watery grave. Their last exhale filling the air all around me. I'm completely on my own now, in the elements, in the dark. As my hand enters the water, there is a splash. Another splash follows as my arm flows into the darkness to sweep through the water and pull me forward. I'm completely suspended in the darkness, self-propelling myself through it. I'm vulnerable, yet feeling in control, and, at the same time, at the mercy of the ocean. This is a different world to what we live in. I am at peace here, despite the chaos. The world cannot see me, and I cannot see the world. I am comfortable, and in the moment, more than I ever am on land. I stop and take a quick look around to check my position. There's nothing out here to give me a bearing. A deep gouge in the cliff at the back of the western side of the beach creates a distinctive V shape against the clouds. I often use it to begin. It may be where the Umbra flows down from the mountain and over the cliff before meandering its way to the beach. Another wave approaches. Without a breath, I dive down into the darkness, the sound muffled once again. I have no warning now, the energy continually coming out of the dark at me, but I will soon slip into its rhythm. To my north, there are big sets of waves rumbling on the outer sandbanks. They dissipate into a deep hole, which runs along the back of the sandbank. They muster enough energy to regain their composure, reform, and break again on the near shore sandbanks. Most of the waves don't flood the gully, but the big ones do. Whitewater surges. It fills and spills over onto the next sandbank with no let-up. Everything is chaotic until I can find the rhythm out here. It isn't a clear swim to the east. A minefield, but with a fine-tuned tempo, wraps all around me. I surface and burst into a front crawl to try and hold my ground at the very least. I get 2 long strokes in before a wave mows me. A current has already moved me out more than I planned. The wave rules me. Should I keep going or turn and go with this flow? It is so dark that my mind uses sound and movement to paint a picture of what is happening around me. It is important to choose my battles and my moments out here. I am swimming with my head out of the water. This is not pool swimming. The surface is chaotic, the waves unpredictable. Crash. Another wave breaks. I dive under in the nick of time and surface back into full stroke. I used to squint and panic, trying to see every wave before it got me. But now, I let it do its thing. I will be okay. I pull myself under when a wave approaches, and when it releases me, I surface, holding my breath and my eyes closed, listening for another one. Once the coast is clear, I open up and breathe. Stroke after stroke, wave after wave. I pull my way through the water and the darkness, trying to find the rhythm. The sea is taking control. Its current reigning over everything else. I plunge my hands into the deep black water among leaves, brambles, and God knows what else, as the Umbra has one last attempt at taking me with it before I break free with the sea. I try hard to keep my face out of the water as I pull through with each stroke. Every now and again, I swim down to feel for the bottom. It's my only way of knowing if I'm moving with or against the flow. I can't see anything ashore to gauge my progress. I think I'm making ground, and I keep stroking forwards into the darkness. The waves aren't breaking where I am now. There is a lull in the energy. The sea has cleared a path through the surf and is drawing me out to deeper water. The lull fills me with concern for where and when the next wave will appear. Blinded by the darkness, I listen and feel for movement. Any sign that the ocean is drawing a breath before pushing waves back towards shore will alert me. It is incredible what worry and fear can do to the mind. I much prefer being among the chaos. At least then, there are no big surprises. Panicked squinting or frantic swimming will not help me. I just keep swimming across the flow. It can't keep this up for much longer, but I will keep swimming regardless. I stop using the front crawl stroke, and instead, I'm on my side using a rescue stroke. I can peer into the darkness and try and see any signs of swell lines coming at me. To the north, the horizon is completely black. I can make out unbroken waves sweeping into the beach against the distant village lights about 4 miles away in the east. The swell briefly blows its cover of darkness as it becomes silhouetted long enough for me to spot it moving on me. The crest of the swells is feathering in the wind whipping the top of the black, tumultuous sea. The spray from the breaking waves fills the air, raining down on me as I continue to pull through the water. After a few minutes of hard swimming, I can tell the current has subsided, leaving me beyond the surf zone. I start to swim front crawl again. A very big wave breaks, and instead of diving under it, I stay above the water, hold my breath, and let it hit me. I try to keep my arms and legs spread so as to be as big as possible and get pushed further towards shore. The power ragdolls me. I get pushed in and down and rolled all around under the water before surfacing again. I'm back in the gully between the outside break and the inside break. Now I can feel I'm moving well. With each stroke, I pull through the water. I'm powering along the coast. I've found rhythm. I can see very little, but I've tuned into the movement and the sounds out here. Despite the darkness and the wild, uncontrollable elements, I am part of it all. I'm making progress using whatever I have to hand, and it's working. The draw from a big set approaching is pulling the water out towards it. Then crash, the first wave breaks. I pull down under it and pop back up after it passes overhead. I get a few strokes in before the next one. The set moves me back into the gully again, and I continue swimming. I'm flowing now, stroke after stroke, ploughing through the darkness. The waves come and I swim with them and under them. This is where I'm supposed to be. The moment is now, calm in the chaos. There are 3 rocks in the surf zone along this beach, and a scattering of much larger lumps of rock, breaking through the sands below the cliffs to the east. One of the smaller rocks looks like an alligator. I have it marked by one of the only reference points on land. A knob of rock sits up higher than the cliffline, right on the edge. The alligator is lying in the water to the north of it. Its ridges poke up out of the sand for about 4 meters. Sometimes it lies completely covered in sand. At other times, its back tears through the seabed below the water, leaving a sharp ridge exposed and dangerous. It is in shallow water when the tide is high, and on the dead lows, it is completely out of the water. Still, because I never know my exact position, I am always very wary of where it is. As I approach it, I keep my body flat. I'm careful not to draw my hands further down into the water in case it gets me. In reality, I'm usually much further out from the rock, but it's always in my mind. The next rock lies in similar depths. It is a much bigger chunk of rock that at times breaks the surface of the water, depending on the tide. It is next to a stream that runs off the beach. I often come back ashore here, but tonight, the current is so strong, I decide to stay out among the surf and continue to swim with it. The current does not ease off, as it sweeps to the east under cover of darkness. I'm in the moment out here. Everything is flowing. The water, the wind, the currents, me. I'm in no rush to leave, back to the monster pandemic that strangles my other world. Recognizing all the elements that affect me is key. Noticing when they are aligned and in my favour is crucial. Keeping swimming when they are not and holding my ground is just as crucial. recognizing when the darkness and energy is overpowering me, and staying calm is vital. I have one thing to do: keep swimming. Keep my head above water, stay calm, and be ready for my moment to move once the elements are in my favour. Stroke after stroke, wave after wave, I enjoy the moment. Sometimes it makes sense to fight the current. Sometimes it makes sense to go with it. But ignoring it and doing nothing usually ends in trouble. Finally, I reach the cliff with the temple perched right on the edge. The words inscribed around it always stick in my mind. As it has watched many a sailor, it is now watching me. It looms overhead as the current begins to clash with the cliffs, the surface becoming chaotic once again among the big, ominous lumps of black rock that breach the surface close to shore. White water is surging over the rocks in the shallows and washing up the black basalt cliff face. I turn towards shore and let the swells lift me and move me with them as they career towards the shore. The speed of the water rushing past my face stretches my neoprene hood and flushes the cold Atlantic in around me. I lie in the shallows for a few moments. The cliff and temple tower above, as if to protectively hold back the world into which I am about to return. I leave the dark depths, turn and nod to the horizon again. The sea still clings to me as I stand on the dry sand. I'm huffing and puffing to get my breath back. I'm feeling very alive right now. The sea begins to run off my body into the sand and back to the darkness, back to the other world. The storm is still raging all around me, but I'm at ease among it. Back at the van, I waste no time. It's crucial that I stay warm and not allow the cold to infiltrate and risk getting sick. I get into the van with my wetsuit still on. I soak the seat every night, but I don't care. Sea, sand, water, and salt tend to get everywhere in my life. It's not a bad complaint. I turn on the headlights to illuminate my path off the beach. The eerie, yellowy white light falls over the waves of sand and the pockets of snow. I forgot to text Sarah, so I stop before joining the road to let her know I'm on my way home. I'm buzzing from the swim, pumped up. It is such a great experience to have, and it's different every night. The road is still frozen. I stop at the junction to the road, and my wheels are spinning. I can't get the tires to bite. So much water runs down the hill to the beach that it is frozen right where I need to get traction. I roll the van back down to the level ground and take a run up at it. The van takes off up the hill, over the junction, and we start climbing the 300 metres back up to the top of the cliffs. I'm trying to maintain speed because if I dare stop, I won't get the traction again. I cruise back to the village through the deserted countryside and empty streets. I pass one other car and a neighbour. He is out letting his dog have a pee before bed. I'm sure he recognises my van, but he doesn't wave. One thing's for sure, he won't for a second think I was swimming. As I pull into the driveway, I can already see Blighton at the window, socks in his mouth, growling, barking, and wagging his big tail. Sarah lights a candle each night while I'm out swimming. It is flickering behind the glass in the porthole window. They know how to welcome me home, and I've only been away an hour or so. Going home after something so exhilarating is surreal. Sarah is sitting working by the window, Blighton going daft as usual, back to normality. If I didn't tell you about it, you wouldn't know it even happened. My turf is still smouldering. Despite the wind, it has stayed lit for me getting home. The smell of turf is like an Irish trademark. I only ever smell it here. It always reminds me of being at the coast in winter with the fire lit after surfing great waves. I stand by the fire for a moment or two. There is little heat from it, but it is comforting nonetheless, as the cinders stand against the darkness. I pull my wetsuit hood off now. The steam rises from me as I pull my suit down to my waist. My boots are full of water. As I pull them off, the water melts the snow on the ground. I whip the rest of my suit off until I'm completely naked, and I go in to get my clothes back from Blighton. Chapter 3. Light the Fire. The pandemic is reaching further into life now. Not only is it infecting people's bodies, but it is infecting minds. It is breaking down what most consider normal. Everyone, from us on the street to the leaders, are struggling. We are all facing continual challenges coming at us out of the dark. Almost every day brings more doom and gloom. Every one of us is in the same dark waters, but we swim different strokes. Lockdown forced peace onto the coasts like never before. Locals enjoyed their homes without tourists or second homeowners cluttering their lockdown safe place. But the summer of 2020 saw lots of restrictions lifted, and people rushed to the coast. The privilege of being close to the sea became more and more sought after. Foreign travel was banned, and so people began to look to domestic shores for freedom and escape, the lure of the ocean drawing them from their lives en masse. Locals were subject to a huge daily swell in population. It was intimidating for the vulnerable. Coastal villages that were quiet and seen as safe during lockdown became bustling under a swarm of day trippers. They tell us the monster thrives indoors among us, so people rush to the open spaces. The vastness of the coast, with the distant horizon in view, was their saviour. Parking spaces were occupied by 10 a.m. most days, and the beaches were windbreaker and deck chair cities. A blow-up paddleboard was the must-have beach accessory. Fancy changing robes were the must-have fashion accessory. Some of the restrictions imposed dictated that all the toilets were locked. This didn't stop people arriving in droves. The sand dunes and coves became makeshift toilets for queues of cars arriving each day. I've never seen the coast so busy. People did everything they could to escape into the fresh air outdoors by the sea. It was like a scene from a movie where there had been a mass evacuation and everyone rushed to the extremities of the land to escape the disaster. At the end of each day, heaps of rubbish were left all over the beaches and spilling out of the bins. The area couldn't cope. The fear of disease transmission meant that many locals cautiously ventured out only late in the evenings or early in the morning. It was this overpopulation of the coast that drove me to find my own escape. I had no interest in going out or going surfing among all that during the day. The only time I left the house at that time was to get shopping for others. My exercise was reduced to doing chin-ups in the forest while walking Blighton. Paddleboarding, rowing, or anything water-based meant wading through crowds beforehand. I had to do something else to remain sharp and grounded without adding to the numbers at the coast. The places us locals tended to escape to had become relief for others. I had to become more creative and find a different world. I've been swimming and surfing all my life, but my mind rarely switches off when I do. I'm so comfortable out there in the sea. My mind is never distracted enough to completely disconnect from the real world. Unless I'm surfing big waves, then I find I'm very at ease, and my mind wanders through daily life and all that is going on while I'm in the water. But when swimming in the dark, wild North Atlantic surf, the opposite has proven true. I am forced to pay attention, be aware of what's going on around me at all times. I completely disappear from the world. I go out into the dark and I'm free. I disconnect from the world and connect with the elements. There's great freedom in that. The sea has attracted huge numbers since the pandemic began, and I imagine many of those who have found it as their escape also see it as total freedom. A change in perspective can change your life. Swimming in the darkness means several things to me. One of them is escape. All my life, before the pandemic, I have been disappearing to a far-off location to surf and camp, somewhere that is new, somewhere far out at sea, or somewhere around the corner that isn't the trendy place to go. I like the connection I have to the elements. I find that connection is stronger in isolation within them. That is what swimming in the dark is to me. Total escape and absorption in my environment. But as time has gone on, I've realised it is many more things too. Swimming in the dark is a great metaphor for life, especially now. To swim in the dark is what we are all doing. Add in surf, currents, and crazy weather, and that makes swimming in the dark even more like the lives we are all living right now. Like many things in life, the pandemic has come at us from the dark with no warning, and we must keep swimming to survive. And that is what we do. We try to keep swimming. We keep our heads above water. On top of all the individual dark swims we are all doing in the privacy of our own lives, we, as a planet, are now all swimming through the darkness as one. We are swimming together, and we are all also swimming for ourselves. It is quite an unusual time in history to have everyone at all levels of society thrown in the deep end together. I was looking at the window one morning, looking at the conditions. Sara had the TV on in the background as she worked on a new fashion collection. She is an artist and fashion designer and likes background noise while she draws. We were hooked on the news at that point, watching everything COVID related, to try and keep a step ahead of what may or may not be coming. The world was crumbling in many ways. We were on the lookout for how it may impact us. I wasn't paying attention to the TV, but a news report came on, and I thought I heard the presenter mention that a local health charity was closing some services because they were experiencing a serious lack in donations due to the pandemic. The charity, called Aware, was not the first I had heard that may be suffering this drought, but this time it hit home. I began to think about all the people that wouldn't have the support they had before COVID, and the people that now need support who didn't pre-pandemic. Depression and suicide seemed to be on the rise due to all the complications people were facing. I immediately went online. I sent an email to the charity asking if I was correct in thinking that donations were drying up. I also asked about what they were offering to individuals, as I could see a lot of their work was with groups. Groups are great, but sometimes people don't want to be part of a group if they aren't feeling great. The person who responded didn't ever confirm to me that donations were an issue. They told me about some great programs they provide for individuals and that lots of them were now moving online. It looked like a good service, and I wanted to try and help. I was aware that people were likely not making donations because of pandemic wage cuts, so I did not think that I would be able to change that. Donations would be great, but I figured that raising awareness of depression and inspiring people to look out for it in themselves and those around them would have a greater impact on the levels of depression than any money I might be able to drum up. I began to wonder if I could use my swimming in the dark in some way to raise this awareness and funds. Swimming through the dark, cold North Atlantic surf and currents is a great metaphor for what we are all facing at the minute: the dark, the unknown. I was a little uncertain if giving up my little escape was a good idea. I had found a different world, a different perspective of life in something right in front of me. I enjoyed the simplicity it brought to life during this crazy time we are all living through. It was simple and didn't bother anyone else in any way whatsoever. I found something new, a complete release and more, but still in my beloved sea. I had begun to realise that my love for surfing was more a love of the sea. I was enjoying slipping into the darkness alone. If I were to turn it into some sort of a fundraiser type affair, it would no longer be that. I knew that whatever I did with it would mean people, safety, and all the things I hated that surfing had become. Too many people and machines took the edge off surfing for me for a while. The simple act of surfing had become such an organisational headache, with multiple jet skis, boats, and bodies in the water to facilitate it. I did not want to do that to my new thing. I was also unsure how it might be received. People don't do this. It's not the done thing to swim kilometres in the surf zone in the Irish winter on your own. It is an out there idea, and maybe it wouldn't result in helping people at all. I pondered it over the next few days. I was swimming, thinking about how it may never be the same again. Will I ruin it, or will the light be shone on it, and in some way light the darkness for those struggling to keep their heads above water? What even would I do? Did I suggest that people sponsor me to do a swim, or a distance, or what? When I thought about it, I realised that when we are struggling, We need help, inspiration to keep going that little bit longer, to hang in there, and at some point, hopefully, the tide starts to turn. I needed not to do a simple sponsored distance or the likes. I needed to use this to affect people who may hear about what I'm doing and give them some sort of hope or make them look out for others around them. Like it has helped me, maybe it will help others. That's what I needed to do. Receiving donations would be great and no doubt would help the charity fund what they do, but I needed to do what I could do to help too, not solely raise funds. I decided that doing a swim would not be sufficient to achieve that. I needed to demonstrate determination, longevity, courage, positivity, routine and stamina. Those are some qualities which, when we were at our lowest, we struggled to find. I wasn't going to demonstrate any of those by doing a swim. I needed to go deeper than that. In the end, I decided that swimming in the darkness through the surf zone in the depths of winter was great, and yes, a perfect metaphor. But to achieve the inspiration, hope, and support in others struggling, I needed to return to the sea over and over again. I needed to swim every night, regardless of the weather, regardless of how I felt, regardless of what day it was. I needed to be consistent. Being consistent is what often results in overcoming the times of feeling low. I believed that in doing so, I would have a greater chance at demonstrating all those things. The question was, how much is enough? How much swimming in these wild conditions in the depths of the Irish winter could I handle? One of my concerns was the effect it may have on my life. There was a lockdown in place, which meant a lot of my life was on hold. I couldn't travel for any form of work that I was involved with. I had a very lucrative job postponed in Germany. My surf travel was completely stopped, and unless I was working from home online, I couldn't do much else. So swimming through the winter nights would be achievable for the foreseeable. Lockdown permitted exercise too, so I initially thought I would swim for the whole of December, 1 kilometre a night. The beach at Castle Rock, where I am based, is exactly that long. I was unsure if I would be able to do that much every night. The currents and the surf dictate how easy it is or is not. Then I wondered if Christmas would get in the way. Would weekends be problematic because there are more people about on the beaches? After some thought, I knew I was aiming a little too low. I settled on swimming 100 kilometres, and I gave my project the title, Swim Through Darkness. I had no idea if I could achieve it, but I believed it would work out as I went. I planned to swim over the 3 darkest and coldest months of the year, December to the end of February. If I got held off some nights because of the north wind, then I would make it up in another swim. I reckoned that would be sufficient to raise awareness of depression during the pandemic and hopefully provide some sort of support or hope for someone out there. The idea hinged around depression. Not that I felt I was suffering from it, but that depression was on the rise. Suicide too. And I've seen both of those a lot in life. I'm sure there were lots of other charities that also needed support, but the depression issue hit home with me. I could see how it had the potential to get a lot worse. I do not want to give the names of individuals, as their story is for them to tell, but I've known both men and women diagnosed with depression that have suffered most of their adult life. I have a friend who also suffers, but I don't believe he has been to see a doctor. We often never know who is struggling. I'm sure others are silently struggling too, but they don't break the horizon for long enough to be silhouetted by the light, and so help has difficulty finding them. 2 other friends are no longer here. They took their own lives. With this new added stress in all our lives, it may be more important than ever to look out for ourselves and each other. I knew I would be able to continue doing some swims on my own for a while, but before long, I would need to have a safety team. I'm used to building safety teams into the water with my big wave surfing. To be honest, I'm not a major fan of it. I find it stressful. I end up putting so much energy into making sure everyone else involved is safe that I end up feeling less safe. I would also have to record my swims so I could measure distances. I would record each swim on my watch using a GPS system. I would open up the donations online, but I didn't want to lose what the swimming was to me until the bitter end. I figured I could keep doing it on my own without drawing too much attention until I absolutely had no choice but to get support. I had never planned for my night swimming to become this, but I hoped this would be positive for the greater good. When I added swimming late at night into my life like this, I was concerned about the toll on my mind and body. To this point, I had been leisurely escaping to the dark surf to swim. There was no pressure, just release. But things were about to change. To swim a kilometre or so each night isn't a big deal. In a pool, that is nothing. My granny could do it. In the surf, in the dark North Atlantic, every night. Well, that could become a big deal. How much it may or may not affect my mind, body, and life, I did not know. I didn't want anything to hinder my performance or ability to swim. If I got sick or injured, then I may not be able to carry on and find myself stuck ashore. If life got in the way, I might have to stop. I needed to take every precaution I could to protect my ability to return to the sea every night, regardless of how I felt. I changed my diet to make sure I got everything I needed. I added in lots of calories to recover, stay warm and fueled. I ran my days with self-preservation at the forefront of everything I did. Eating, resting, preparing, all came first. I even stopped surfing. The routine and dedication gave me the structure to life that was being lost in lockdown. So, it was December the 1st. Blyton and I left the house to go for a walk at about 9 p.m. I decided to walk around the village and see if everyone had left the beach. I would then head home and go for the first kilometre swim of the 100 kilometres. It was exciting, and I was eager to get started. As I turned the corner at the western end of the promenade at Castle Rock with Blyton, I could see only one car parked at the beach. It was a little red car, which I knew to be my friend Dave's car. I've known Dave since we were kids. We spent hours playing on the beach, getting up to all sorts of mischief around here for many years. I often bumped into him here, sitting alone late at night. I walked up to the car and he rolled down the window. He looked very distressed. Something was clearly bothering him. My initial approach was to talk to him normally and see how that went. We chatted, joked and had a giggle, but I knew he was about to boil over. He started telling me how he felt his life was over. Dave is very anti-establishment and refuses to conform to many norms in society today. He is, in many ways, free of the shackles of most of society. In other ways, his refusal to conform traps him. He chooses not to do certain things, but instead of doing something to fill the void, he often does nothing. It leaves him frozen. He told me he believed that if the government brought in a vaccine passport, he would be unable to get food and basic amenities to survive. He believed they would police the doors of supermarkets and the likes and prevent access for unvaccinated people. He did not want to get the vaccine, even though he had not been offered it at that point. In fact, no one had, for that matter. He was angry, and he could see no way of being able to survive once they made this mandatory. There was nothing to say that it would become so, but he believed it to be imminent. I spent the next hour standing talking to him, trying to calm him down a little. Logic and planning had left the building, and it was clear his thoughts were in a downward spiral. I didn't force my opinion or thoughts about the whole situation. I just let him ramble until he got it all out. How he sees the world is his choice, and whether I agree or disagree with it is none of my business. All I wanted to do was make sure he was going to be okay. It was a bizarre situation, but he seemed to become less tense and less focused in a tunnel vision-like manner. I am glad I turned up when I did and brought another perspective to his thoughts. It took an hour for me to feel comfortable enough to leave him there on his own again. I worried for a while about what he might do. Last year, 2 people I knew took their own lives, and I feared that was going through Dave's head right at that moment. I left, and he continued to sit there in the car. I was getting changed into my wetsuit at the house, thinking how surreal this was. I have had so many doubts and concerns about starting this whole 100-kilometre swim thing. On the first night, if ever there was a sign to do it, then it was right there. I was kind of in shock, to be honest. I didn't tell Dave what I was doing. It wasn't appropriate, given the conversation we were having. I figured he would find out, although he lives quite a solitary life and tends to hear things many weeks after they become fact. He doesn't have a smartphone or TV. In fact, come to think of it, I wonder where he even heard about vaccine passports for them to bother him so much. I wondered if in his moment of darkness he created a monster which didn't exist, and his thoughts spiraled out of control into panic. I set off on the swim from the pier at Castle Rock to the western end of the beach. Without going into the swim details, by the time I got to the last 300 metres out there in the dark, I could see him. He was still sitting there in his car on his own, overlooking the beach, a good 40 minutes after I left him. He had no idea I was out there, right in front of him, with a plan to raise awareness for what he and lots of others were going through. When I got to the end of the beach, I lay in the sea in the darkness, low in the water for a few minutes until he drove off. Later that night, I went and checked he was safely at his house. He was. It was a strange night. I happened to be in the right place at the right time and was presented with the opportunity to intervene in his thoughts. My fire was fueled to achieve these next 3 months of dark surf swims like never before. I completed the first swim, and night after night I got to it. I swam and I recorded the swims. A few donations trickled in from people that had found the donation link on my website. I began writing blog posts every day with the view to build them into a source of encouragement, hope, or just something for people to follow and read and maybe find something in them that may help them. One night, another old friend, Mark, called at my house. He wanted to get a copy of my kids' book, Confident Chris. I told him what I was doing. He immediately said, "Right, you are not doing that on your own. I'm coming to keep an eye on you." This was the start. Mark is a surfer and had lifeguarded and taught swimming for 12 years. Besides that, he knows me. He knows how I think and behave and what I'm capable of. Often, knowing someone is much more beneficial than being qualified on paper when it comes to doing this sort of stuff and supporting them. Immediately, I had a different feeling about swimming in the dark. Weirdly, it kind of felt like those times when you bottle something up and it's bothering you to the point you can't cope anymore. When you open up, it's like there's a weight lifted. That's how it felt in telling Mark what I was doing. Like I'd opened up and let a little bit of light into the darkness. The next night, I produced radios and a light. Mark also turned up with a light. The plan was I was going to have radio contact with Sarah and Mark. I would also have a little dog light, like the one I found on the beach earlier, attached to me so they could see me. The radios I could handle. The light made me uncomfortable. It went against everything I fell in love with this for. Being seen was exactly what I didn't want. Wearing the light was like Mum sending me to school on non-uniform day, wearing my uniform. I had been swimming out here on my own with none of this. As soon as I left the shore, I disappeared. That's what I love about swimming in the darkness. Just me, the wind, and the sea. To wear a light seemed very wrong. At the same time, having others involved meant I had to evolve and develop what I was doing professionally. I put the radio down the front of my suit, and we agreed to do a radio check across all radios before the swim. I would not use the radio in the surf unless I had to. That way, there would be no confusion. If I were to use the radio in the surf, it would be difficult to make out what was being said with all the commotion out there. So, if something were wrong, I would use the radio. If it didn't respond to a call, then something was also wrong. With the light, we wrapped it in a clear dry bag and strapped it onto me so that it would hang behind my head. It would be enough for Mark to see me, but not enough to disorientate me. Too much light would reflect off the whitewater and make it very difficult for me to see where I was. So, this all made me very uncomfortable. There was something that was making me safer attached to the back of my head. But to anyone who didn't know what was going on, it looked like some idiot was in the water with a head torch on. That could result in an unnecessary emergency call. I was extremely stressed about this. I decided to do the first swim like this at Castle Rock. We met at 9:45 p.m. at the entrance to the beach and got set up. To this point, I had always left for the swim alone. Now Mark was coming with me, which took the edge off it, but brought a lot more to it too. We hadn't seen each other in a few years. Life got in the way. The big old stone pier lurked in the darkness at the eastern end of the beach. Mark and I caught up as we walked there. Even having Mark there removed so much of my connection to the elements. Normally, I only walk the beach with the wind as company. Mark was unintentionally stealing my attention from the wind and the sea. I waded out into the water, as I always do. Mark stood by the water's edge with a torch lit, shining it at his feet all the time as he followed me along the coast. Hopefully, that would be enough to keep people from phoning for help that we didn't need. I found this stressful, to be honest. I was not at ease at all and was thinking about pretty much everything else but the swim. I wanted it to be over. I was like a fish out of water. The whole thing was bothering me, distracting me from the experience. Waves hit me, currents moved me, but I was not in tune with it. It was like the sea was giving me the cold shoulder, brushing past me and blanking me as if I was in its way. I swam and water washed around the beach. It was as vanilla as that. Mark doesn't know this, but I moved the light so it pointed out to sea and would be hard to spot. I desperately windmilled my arms, thrashing my way through the surf and the currents. The faster I could swim, the faster it would be over, and I could turn the bloody light out. Still, I told myself this was for the greater good, and once it was over in a few months, I could go back to what it used to be. I kept swimming. It turned out Mark could barely see me. The little light disappeared with me into the surf and the darkness, and only appeared the very odd time. Over the next few nights, word began to spread about what I was doing. I had more and more people want to come and support me. My friends Lee, Ricky, Lisa, and Laura all came on board too. These guys are the kind of solid, dependable people you would want around you if something were to go wrong. So I now had police, an ambulance crew, a world champion bodybuilder, a deep sea diver, and a swimming teacher on board. All we were missing was a builder, and we had the Castle Rock Village people. I was in very safe hands. On the nights Lee came, he brought down the thickest, most orangey, chocolatey hot chalk the world has ever seen. We would drink it on our walks back along the deserted beach to the van after I swam. Not to be outdone by Lee's prowess with the hot chocolate, Laura would bring down an amazing version of her own, which she told me had a little kick of ginger spice in it. In true me fashion, I didn't realise until many weeks into drinking it that it was laced with ginger liquor. No wonder I didn't feel the cold and thought I was in a different world. We developed more safety systems to keep me safe and know where I was at all times. I also wore a red wetsuit, an impact vest, and a yellow vest over it. If a search had to take place, I would be identifiable among the darkness with a light. I wore a whistle and blew it every 100 yards while I swam. We had a full medical kit, flippers, rescue ropes, extra clothes, and unfortunately, the little dog light got substituted for a bigger LED light, so there was no chance they could lose me. We wrecked lots of lights over the next 3 months. Nothing would withstand the surf and the battering it handed out each night. Lights lasted days before we changed them. What a mission this had become. The thing was, Because of lockdown rules, we were only allowed to meet in small numbers. During some of the restrictions, we were only allowed to meet one other person. So despite having this amazing team of capable friends to support me, I could never have them all there. Lots of others I didn't know offered their help and support too. It was incredible. People saw the potential and they reached out and gave to it. Over the next 2 months, the guys came out every night to support me. They would move work and other life commitments around to make sure I had someone there. They offered everything they could. They would be here standing in the freezing winter, night in, night out, while I swam and got the distances done. They began to know when I would appear back ashore and where. They too became in tune with the environment we were operating in. The darkness became familiar. As time went on, the team realised the stress all this was causing me. I couldn't relax. We pretty much abandoned swimming at Castle Rock, except for a handful of nights or in bad weather. The potential for people who may cause us trouble was just too great. I swam mainly at Downhill Beach in the complete darkness. That made me happier, and everyone began to trust me not to wear the bloody light the odd time. It was kind of like having a light wasn't bold enough not to raise concern in an onlooker, and that stressed me out. We might have been better lighting me up like a Christmas tree, though that would have meant I wasn't swimming in the darkness, and I wouldn't be able to see a thing with the glare of the water. Some nights, the sea and weather conditions were more favourable than others. I prefer the wild nights, as I find them easier to predict what will happen once I enter the sea. But that's coming from 30 years of surfing experience. A seasoned swimmer might prefer calm nights. There were both, and plenty of everything in between. In several swims, I had to decide to turn around as the flow was so strong against me that I just couldn't break through. For the person on the beach, that was when the communication and the light and whistle were crucial, or they wouldn't have any idea where I was. At Castle Rock in particular, there is a section of water identified by a church spire that breaks the skyline to the south. The church is located on Circular Road, and from the sea, the top of the spire is visible over the sand dunes in the distance. It is the first navigational point of reference I have when swimming east to west at Castle Rock. Before the spire, the dunes are low, and there are no obvious marks or breaks in the skyline to either know where I am or confirm if I'm moving or holding ground against the current. The pier does help me know where I am to a degree, but there's no cross-reference in the dark. The water around that area to the north of the spire is almost always difficult to get through. It is never consistently flowing in any direction. It moves west, east, and at times it flows straight out. When all the flow is moving west, the flow there can be the opposite and impassable. I can never tell until I am in the grip of it. It rarely shows above the water though, like other rips in the surf do. At times, I find it difficult to break through, as it often runs counter to my swim direction with the main flow. But it took me way out one night too. It was a big clear night with a big heavy swell and light wind. It was beautiful out there, but the currents were very unpredictable. I got moved way out among the big breaking waves. I had to swim back towards the pier to get out of the flow before getting washed closer in again, and then holding ground until the current dissipated. That night, I ended up on my own, come to think of it. I had a failed swim at Downhill a few hours earlier, as a couple of cars appeared on the beach and spooked me, so I called it off. Laura was there that night, but I told her I would be okay, and I would swim later on my own at Castle Rock once everyone had gone. I didn't want to take any more of her time. Mark also said he would come down for me to swim later, but again, I didn't want to bother him either. To be honest, I'm glad I was on my own, as I think someone may have worried for my safety that night, even though I was fine. Besides the difficult currents in the sea, there were times when I had to fight difficult currents in my mind too, during Swim Through Darkness. And that was one of the reasons I chose to do it over such a prolonged period. Anyone can get the motivation to do something once, but to continually go and do this every night for 3 months takes something else. I knew I would come up against mental obstacles, and they did from time to time get in my way. On Christmas night, my fire needed fuel. I vividly remember standing in the exact same spot I always do, with one leg going into my wetsuit as I got ready to swim. I paused and considered not swimming and instead doing it in the morning. I was just looking for an excuse, but thankfully I snapped out of it. I was feeling low and a little under the weather. Poor me. A few seconds passed as I stared at my foot in the left leg of my wetsuit until I thankfully pulled myself together. I started the swim at 22:40 that night from the pier at Castle Rock. It was a big surf night, and I took quite a hammering out there. No matter how positive and motivated I am, there is always a chance of doubt creeping in. The biggest ally of doubt and a lack of motivation is comfort. The heat on, the fire lit, and numerous other things could be used as an excuse to not go out into the winter night and swim through big surf. I would have felt that I had let myself down and all those supporting me had I not got out there and got it done. It turned out to be a good swim, breaking the 20-kilometre mark. I was on my own that night too, come to think of it. I tried to lay low that day so as not to make any of the team feel obliged to come and support me, as they all have families. So, although I really love what I do, there are, of course, times when life and other things get in the way and try to derail me from what I'm doing. That is when it's most important to not give in. The mental strength it takes at that point is much more difficult to muster than when everything is rosy. Massive support came in from all over the world. Local media picked it up, and it spread to national and international media. Donations poured in, and so too did messages of support. Those messages were touching. I had people sending messages saying the swim was good for them and others struggling. I had a man message from his hospital bed. I had donations from pennies to pocket money to thousands of pounds. Donations from people I knew and from complete strangers. Before this happened, I used to always say I hated social media, but it definitely helped with this. I realised I have a lot of friends online whom I've never met in real life, that I now feel I know better than lots of people I see in every day of my life. I have met some amazing people through Swim Through Darkness, which confirms there are always people out there if you reach out. In the end, the Swim Through Darkness raised awareness and over £20,000 for the charity. I felt really uncomfortable asking for donations at all. I set the target at 3,000, and even that made me uneasy, as I knew everyone was finding life difficult and financial hardship was on the increase. Money was not my primary motivation, but the sum of £20,000 was pledged, which was incredibly generous. After each swim, I would return home and let those following along or who had messaged me know that I was okay. I got a real sense of belonging, and I felt that I was no longer swimming in the dark on my own. I was swimming with people all over the world who were rooting for me every single night. Some of them were standing on the beach, some were in their house in Barbados, but it made no difference. It felt like they were with me. I would message them all every night and fill them in. It felt like something good was happening, something that was reaching the places I had set out to reach. I would have loved to have brought people with me for the final swim, but it wasn't safe. In the final 2 weeks, I could see the seasons changing, evenings getting brighter. Spring was bullying the cold winter nights and the darkness into hibernation. Donations were slowing. People were running out of money. The pandemic was taking its toll. On some nights, I had been swimming 3 and 4 kilometres in the surf. I was way ahead of my target finish date of the end of February. I decided to slow down to a single kilometre every night to drag out the swim to the next payday. I wanted to finish in the February full moon of the 27th, but that wouldn't get me across the payday. I held off and kept the distances to a kilometre. On the final night, the surf was raging, the moon was massive and the sky clear. It was like a symbol from the earth that it was time to stop now. I decided to swim the remaining distance of 2 kilometres and then stay out and go the extra mile. I ended up swimming for about 50 minutes that night in beautiful surf under a big bright sky. Most of the team that had been there with me were there that night too. The darkness we all face is never the same one day to the next. Some days can be worse than others. The hope that the blackness will leave is what often gets us to the next day. The hope that some sort of light will show the way. When there's no light, no moon, we must trust the light within us. We have to find our own moon. You must find your moon. Your moon will light your way when all other light is gone. Find it, connect to it, let it absorb you and guide you through the dark times. Then your own light will ignite. I felt so uncertain at the start, but at the end, I felt swim through darkness was a good thing to do, not just for me, but for all of us involved. We are all human beings, and we all have had our struggles, and we have been there through many of them together. Even if it was never broadcast, we were, and we will continue to be. That is what it's all about. There's only so much we can do as individuals. With the right people around, and I stress the right people, great things can happen. I would never have achieved this on my own. The money and the awareness happened because of those that stood here, planned for my safety, looked out for me, spread the word, donated the money. And it is very likely we helped someone, really helped someone. And if we didn't, then the charity will use the £20,000 to help someone on our behalf. Chapter 4. Perspective. I'm on Downhill Beach. It is a nice sunny day with a little surf rolling through. I open the back of the van doors and pull out my wetsuit. I haven't been in the sea for 2 weeks at this point. I decided to take a break and let the body and mind recover from the relentless and nightly swims of the Swim Through Darkness project. I didn't let my good habits slip though. Despite not swimming every night, I have maintained the same daily practices I had developed as routine over the past few months of the pandemic. Returning to the sea just 2 weeks after being in it every night for a long time was weird. In fact, I haven't been in the sea in daylight for months now. I'm feeling a little stiffer than normal. I must have seized up over the past 2 weeks of no exercise. I moan and groan as I haul my bone-dry wetsuit up over my feet and up to my waist. I pull my top layers off all in one go and toss them in the van, burying my white skin into the cold air. I slip my left arm into the wetsuit sleeve and then the right. I've done this so many times over the past 30 years, but today I'm noticing the material and the elements much more than normal. The 2-week break has sharpened my senses and awareness, and the process of simply putting on my wetsuit has moved from the subconscious to my conscious mind. I start to walk to the water's edge. A weird feeling of self-consciousness enters me as I leave the van behind up below the cliffs, and I walk out into the vastness of the beach. I suppose I haven't done this in daylight in a very long time. Everything seems broader than at night. I walk to the water's edge, and the water rushes into my wetsuit boots. The cold is so much more noticeable than it was in all winter. Have I softened into some sort of a wimp in the past 2 weeks? I felt this strange disconnection with the sea once before, after the first lockdown. Surfing wasn't allowed, and so I didn't surf. In fact, I just wrote books about surfing. As I stand here in the shallows, I feel disconnected from it. This is strange for me. I walk out into the sea, my feet clearly visible through the crystal water. The little flatfish are darting across the seabed as they sense my approach. The white water in the surf is whiter and brighter than ever. As the water gets deeper, the waves wash around me. There is no current, no push and pull battle between the sea and the waters rushing into it. Just a clean swell rising on the near shore sandbanks before gently breaking and washing to shore. I look along the coast that I've been swimming in after dark. I normally don't see any of this from here. The clear water and the white waves are breaking and washing up the beach all the way into the distance at the edge of the long golden sands. I haven't seen this sight from the water in 3 months, despite being right here every night. It is incredible how a different perspective can either shine light on something or remove light from something. I pause to look ashore. The big cliffs stand tall as seabirds and crows glide around in the updraft. The temple stands reassuringly and fearlessly on the edge of the cliff. For months, Only its silhouette stood, looking over me while I swam. The waterfalls flowed down the dark basalt rock face and across the beach into the ocean. The beautiful golden sands stretch as far as the eye can see. The little beach shacks and holiday homes, tucked below the cliff, look out to sea where memories and good times happen for families locked down elsewhere. All this is here, hidden by the dark. But when the darkness closes in, everything disappears. The dark hinders my sight, but so many other things become prominent in my mind. Outside distractions vanish with nightfall, and my world becomes just me and the sea. Just like when I was a kid, and the only thing that mattered was when I could next get into the water to play on my polystyrene surfboard. I feel the water creep into my suit. I hear the sea move and fade, pulse and dance, more than I was ever aware of before I started swimming at night. The darkness allowed me to withdraw into my mind without distraction. I lost myself out here in the darkness, the same way I did many years ago as a child on this exact same beach, mesmerised by the water, the waves, the openness. It has given me new insight, new depth to both myself and other people. I'm more aware than ever of the many worlds I have within one life, and choosing where I spend my time is vital to survival in the crazy world we all share. I continue out into the surf and swim under a wave, reaching forward with both hands out into the turquoise green water that has been black as night for so long. I pull both hands down by my sides and draw myself through below the crashing surf overhead. The light dims momentarily as the wave moves across the surface. The wave darkens the golden sand on the seabed for a second or two before the light again penetrates the surface, and I can see clearly under the water. I swim back up and draw a breath of fresh air. It is incredible how the exact same experience can be so different. The wind that seemed to torture me all winter now appears at ease with me out here again. The horizon now clear for the first time in months. A beautiful green wall of water shows beyond the sandbanks and is coming towards me. It feels like this wave has been sent for me. It slowly moves and wobbles its way towards shore in what seems like slow motion. My senses are hyper-aware now, just like in the dark. I turn towards shore, reach out, and take 2 effortless strokes through the water. The wave wraps around me, taking me with it. Its energy collects me, and I become part of it, gliding through the water as the wave continues to shore. I roll onto my side with one arm out in front and body surf as the wave crashes white water all around me. A few seconds seem like a minute in my mind, everything in slow motion. It feels right to be back in here. The wave's energy dissipates and leaves me lying in its wake, floating on my back in the shallows as it moves on up the beach. Little waves wash over me as I take it all in. 3 months of swimming here in the darkness every single night has given me a new appreciation for what I do every single day. Did I take the sea for granted? Maybe so, but not intentionally. I get to my feet and walk backward out of the water, back to the dry sand, and pause for a second. With eyes closed, I nod to the sea before walking back to the van. It feels like the circle is complete. As is often the case, surfing and the sea have been an anchor in my life. They have been there through everything and will continue to be. I longed to get back to the darkness. Chapter 5. Back to the black. The darkness that used to fall at 4 p.m. has now moved around the clock to 8 p.m. The sun is gradually ending its day further north and will continue to move as the months move into summer. The light is stronger than even a month ago, casting beautiful light along the water's edge before dark settles in for the night. It seems like the sea has settled since the last winter swell of the season has passed. It is recovering, settling down, recharging its energy. I leave the house later than normal. It is 10 minutes past midnight. People were on the beach tonight until half an hour ago. I park at the entrance to the beach. I am on my own again. I haven't told anyone I'm going. Sara has the radio on beside her, but the crew that have been here with me over the past 3 months are not here. I want to do this one alone. I want to go back to before Swim Through Darkness. Just me and the sea. I step out of the van into the dim moonlight. It is just a sliver of light among a canopy of bright stars. Cloud passes overhead and momentarily dims the scene. It is a cold, calm night, and my breath fills the air as I quietly push the door closed in the van. Within a few seconds of walking, I'm back into the darkness. The golden sand at the entrance to the beach fades, and the beach is like a scene from a black and white movie. It is not as dark as some nights have been, nor as bright, but it is stunning all the same. I walk along the inside of the sand dunes. I always find the places people are most likely not going to go are where I relax the most. I walk through the dunes as they rise and fall, the sand soft and moving below each step of my wetsuit boots. The long marram grass is silver in the night's light. I'm walking to the eastern end of the beach. Castle Rock is where this all began, and it feels right that I'm back here on my own to begin swimming in the dark again. I'm walking to the big old pier that trains the river Ban out into the sea. A lonely navigation light pulses in the night. It stands all year round, facing all the Atlantic throws at it. That is where I'm going to start my swim from. It is always darkest up there. As I arrive at the end of the dunes, I can see the river glistening in the light from the stars and the moon. It is flowing like liquid silver out into the black Atlantic. I leave the cover of the sand dunes and move to the shadows of the stone and concrete pier. If there happened to be anyone around, the pier would give me the cover as my black wetsuit blends into the shadows. I stop and hunker down against the wall for a moment. The distant village lights cast a magical golden carpet, illuminating the space between two worlds. This golden strip is only visible when I am within it. It can't be seen from standing further up the beach. The sea softly reaches out into the golden light before slipping back into the black. It is calling me back to dance with it again. I pause to listen to the waves breaking against the rocks and the pier, the roar of the ocean demanding me back. I stand up and slip my way into the dark waters and the current that flows along the rocks, leading to my other world. The deep water carries me out along the edge of the pier. It transports me gently and effortlessly into the dark North Atlantic waves once again. I duck under into the black, and it feels like I'm back where I belong. I start to swim and move through the water to the west. Wave after wave moves over me as I glide with the current, moving across the sandbank close to the pier. The waves have come to greet me, to embrace me, welcome me back. I am part of this, and it part of me. The end. Thank you for listening to this recording. I hope you enjoyed it. The book was written by me, Mennie, and this audio version was also performed by me on the north coast of Ireland. The audio was mixed and mastered in Portugal by Miguel Oliveira. You can find out more about my books on my website, almennie.com. Thank you.